Senku or Tsukasa. Ever since I started the Dr. Stone anime, I've always heard people say that they would join the Empire of Power. Or, as much as they like Senku and his science, they agree with Tsukasa's take on the modern world. And it really speaks to how compelling Tsukasa is as the story's antagonist. Now, while there can only be one winner in the anime, I thought it'd be fun to host our own IRL Stone Wars. To do that, I've invited Broken Ronin to make a case for joining the Empire of Power. Meanwhile, I'll be making a case for, wait for it, science! God, I love saying that. Anyway, make sure to tell us in the comments which side you're joining in the Stone Wars. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week in the next video. This week's comment comes from Kisley Tawari. Really cannot thank you enough for the kind words. Also, remember to help reach the 1,000 subscriber challenge by liking the video, sharing it as much as you can, and subscribing for weekly One Piece and Dr. Stone videos. With that out of the way, let's start with the Kingdom of Science. And what isn't there to love about the Kingdom of Science? There's the, science, which should be all the reason you need because, come on, who doesn't love science? Maybe you don't like science homework, but let's be real, you and I both know experiments are fun as hell. And it's those experiments that make the Kingdom of Science home to all kinds of inventions. There's the water wheel that gives everyone electricity, the super adorable steam gorilla, the cell phone, the high-level blacksmithing from Kaseki, and all kinds of insane technology. But that's just the beginning. We know Senku loves his science, so he's constantly cooking up new inventions. Granted, he's usually cooking up some mad scientist schemes and putting everyone to work, but it's always worth it in the end. Plus, you're kinda screwed in the information department without Senku. No internet means no instant information. No information means you're limited to what you and everyone else can remember. So without Senku's encyclopedic memory of science, you're kinda screwed. But it's not all about the crazy super science. There's also tons of smaller inventions that we probably rely on even more. If you have a hard time reading, you're gonna want glasses like Kinro and Suika. If you get sick, you're gonna want prescription-level medication like Ruri. When winter comes around, you're gonna want quick and easy food like space ramen. I know it's not really from space, but it's just so much more fun saying it that way. Speaking of which, the food is so much better in the Kingdom of Science. Not that they can't get decent grub in Tsukasa's empire, but it doesn't even come close to the Kingdom of Science food. Ramen, cotton candy, cola. Our boy Gen literally died for this stuff. That's how good it is. So you're clearly missing out on a ton of important stuff when you join Tsukasa. Now, I'll admit the Empire of Power does have its perks. With the superhumans on your side, that means better hunting. Aside from the more modern food, the Kingdom of Science is kinda stuck with fish. So if you hate fish, the Empire is looking pretty attractive right now. Speaking of attractive, let's not forget that this is the Tsukasa Empire. It really does not get more attractive than Tsukasa. Ripped muscles, long flowing hair, that Bruno Bucciarati voice of his. If you can resist that charm, then by all means, kudos to you, friend, because I certainly couldn't. But even if you can, remember, this is the Empire of Power. Any fight with Tsukasa or Hyoga is gonna last 2 seconds tops. And there's also the revival fluid. Prior to the actual Stone Wars, the Kingdom of Science had no means of getting revival fluid. Meanwhile, Tsukasa can resurrect anyone he can find. So hey, if you got a petrified friend and you can convince Tsukasa to help you out, the Empire might just be the better pick. But that's if you can convince him. And that's when we get into Tsukasa's plan for paradise. Like I said earlier, the guy does have a point. Look at everything that happened in the last year. Hell, I'm sure there was some global atrocity just in the last week. Like he points out, the modern world can be a pretty dark place. It's no wonder so many people tend to agree with Tsukasa. But while he does have a point, his plan will never work. It's just too naive. Tsukasa has his heart in the right place, but like Senku says early on, you're always going to have science. There's always going to be those curious people who ask questions and go out looking for answers. And you know what? As harmful as science may be, it does a lot of good too. So if we follow someone with a kind heart like Senku, maybe we can leave the world a better place than when we got here. And that's why we should join the Kingdom of Science and put our faith in Senku. But that's just my take. Now, let's hear what Broken Ronin has to say about the Empire of Power.
Usually whenever you look at two separate ideologies of a series, many people would go with the protagonist ideals and motives, seeing as how they are usually much less radical and much more logical in nature. But for me, in the world of Dr. Stone, I think that Tsukasa and the Empire of Might as a whole genuinely have a lot of points that, while radical in nature, are things that can generally spark thought and discussion. So let me tell you why I personally am siding with Might. When looking at it from the perspective of someone in the Dr. Stone world, Tsukasa's extremely idealistic outlook through reforming the world through might and gatekeeping and deciding who he wants to bring back isn't such a horrible idea. Imagine for a second a world without a generation who has corrupted our world in the way that it is now. Large industries that had polluted the world of 3,000 plus years ago can now be taken out without even having to lift a finger. Tsukasa and the Empire of Might are advocates for keeping the world as removed from science and typical order as possible. And when you look at the world of Dr. Stone and even take a glance into our real world, it's pretty easy to see why. Incompetency and abuse of power all around. Whether it be from a single household to an entire nation, it seems to be the case that the knowledge of science is too tantalizing for human beings to wield without becoming corrupted. And while science is something that has slingshotted humans far into the advancements, especially in things like the medical field, extending lives and saving millions, it has also become the cause of millions of deaths and suffering of millions more. Tsukasa himself is also a person worth following and worth fighting for. With an immense amount of dedication and drive and the physical power to back that dedication up, Tsukasa clearly has shown and demonstrated his will to move forward and create a safe place for all who are willing to join him. His strict moral code of keeping those who are young and pure alive and eradicating any who may oppose the utopian society that he's building ensures that as long as you side with Tsukasa, as long as you side with the Empire of Might, your personal safety and the safety of the Empire is ensured. By rejecting this world and pushing for a less hierarchical structure based on status and pushing for a more natural order of things, the troubles and traumas that the world of old have caused can be eradicated without so much as a trace. In comparison to the Kingdom of Science led by Ishigami Senku, the Empire should clearly be the correct choice. Being willing to revive everyone, including those who were once in power and will no doubt abuse that power, is an evil and almost heinous act. Having the ability to stop such evil people from being brought back into the world and not doing so is simply something that the Empire of Might and Tsukasa cannot accept. So raise your fist and join me in the Empire of Might so that we may bring about a new, fair, honest, and free world, free from the burdens and sadness that Senku's science and the Empire of Science may bring. No longer will Ishigami Senku's science be used to harm the defenseless and weak. No more will it be used to fight against people who cannot fight for themselves. Things such as weapons will no longer be used to cause massive harm to nations of different varieties and different types. These abusive substances that science has been able to produce will also no longer be in the mix. All of these things and more will be eradicated by simply eradicating the concept of science. By halting our scientific advancement and focusing on our own personal development and our strength, focusing on the natural order of things, Tsukasa and the Empire of Might are ensuring that we do not bring ourselves to yet another situation where self-destruction is not only a possibility, but a promise. Keep these things in mind when making your decision on who to join: the Kingdom of Science or the Empire of Might.
And there you have it. Now that you've heard from both sides, it's time to make your choice. If you join Senku, you can bring back all the great technology and save everyone from the petrification. At the same time, you risk bringing back all the same modern evils. But if you join Tsukasa, you can build a world that's free from those modern evils. Of course, this means getting rid of half the population and saying goodbye to everything you loved about the modern world. Either way, tell us who you're joining in the comments below. This video was a ton of fun to put together, and it wouldn't have been that way if Tsukasa was even slightly different. The way he persuades people really just goes to show how believable he is as a character. You know, except for the whole punching a lion part. But, like I said earlier, while there will only be one winner in the anime, maybe things would have been a little different if they had happened in the real world. And that's it for this discussion. Make sure to thank Broken Ronin by subscribing to his channel for regular Jujutsu Kaisen content. Remember to help reach the 1,000 subscriber challenge by liking the video, commenting which side you would join, and subscribing for weekly One Piece and Dr. Stone videos. Thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.